Outdoor Survival Skills Prologue: The Philosophy of a Caveman. It is asserted from time to time that true survival is measured by a person's capacity to stay put and prepared with a super pack of hauled and safeguards, that learning edible plants and trapping and hunting skills are not necessary, since most lost persons are rescued within 72 hours anyway. Without negating the wisdom of preparation and safeguard, I would say that the philosophy behind this modern dependency is still a dangerous one. Because of confidence and practice, when one learns to live off the land entirely, being lost is no longer life-threatening. Any manufactured item, such as a good knife or sleeping bag, then becomes a useful and appreciated luxury, but not a dire necessity. Example: on a particularly dry day, Zeke Sanchez stepped from a small boat onto a bleak stretch of the shore of Lake Powell in southern Utah. The man who owned the boat and had given us the ride across the lake stared, open-mouthed, as Zeke handed me his gear and bade me farewell. He was on his way to catch up with a group of students and leaders about 3 days ahead of him in some of the most beautiful but forbidding desert land in North America. He was dressed in jeans, boots, and a long-sleeved shirt, and on his head was tied a large bandana. That was all. The boatman called out to Zeke, "What about your pack?" "He doesn't want it," I interrupted. "He needs to travel fast to catch the group before the week is over." But he can't live out there without something," said the boatman. "What about a canteen, a sleeping bag, and something to eat?" "He knows where the water is. He sleeps on a coal bed, and the roots are easy digging," I assured him. Zeke disappeared over the first sand ridge of iron-topped mesa, and the boatman took me across the lake, talking all the while of unsuspecting individuals who had died in that very desert. He was certain Zeke was a dead man. I quietly acknowledged his concern and agreed with him that the desert is indeed a dangerous place. I said, even if a person is prepared with all the freeze-dried, super lightweight, rip-stop finery that technology offers, it's still dangerous. The desert has a way of getting things away from you. Still, without technological carry-ins, a person might not survive. That is, most people might not survive. Although the boatman was wise to the harshness of the land and was a veteran of many desert travels and even rescue operations, he had little confidence in his or anyone's ability to make it out there without some basic camping and survival gear. Zeke, on the other hand, was not oblivious to the reality of the desert. Instead, he possessed a oneness with that land and knew how to use what was already there for survival. Zeke might have enjoyed a sleeping bag, but he was not bound to it, and traveling quickly was more important in his mind. Since he had poked his nose into many crevices in times past, he knew how and where to look for water rather than scenery, so he was outfitted completely. In the wilderness, one must realize that there is not a single condition or extremity that is entirely without purpose. Every hour is beneficial to those who make it their study and aim to improve upon the experience they gain. What becomes a survival situation to one person may not concern another. Besides, who can count on being rescued within 72 hours? It's just not a very personal statistic. 3 days later, Zeke caught up to his student group, well-watered and sassy from eating pack rats, cicadas, mahonia berries, biscuit roots, chenopodium, and cactus fruits. He sported 2 new rat skin possibles pouches, a woven rice grass sleeping mat, a greasewood digging stick, 2 dozen Paiute deadfall triggers, fire sticks, 20 feet of cliff rose rope, a jasper knife, a bone weaving awl, an unfinished serviceberry bow stave, and a whole bundle of reed grass arrow shafts. Survival studies have shown that those who adapt successfully in a situation of stress share some attributes that set them apart from those who don't adapt. A survivor possesses determination, a positive degree of stubbornness, well-defined values, self-direction, and a belief in the goodness of humankind. He is also cooperative. He does not feel that humanity's basic nature is to promote only self-interest. Instead, he believes that most people are concerned about the well-being of others. Consequently, he is active in daily life and is usually a leader, though he may also belong to groups as a strong follower. A survivor is also kind to himself. He does not fear pain or discomfort, nor does he seek to punish himself with them. He is not a self-hater. Even if the most difficult existence is acceptable to him, it is beyond his ability to change it. Otherwise, he will fight for change. He knows the odds. Because a survival situation carries an aura of timelessness, a survivor cannot allow himself to be overcome by its duration or quality. A survivor accepts the situation as it is and improves it from that standpoint. One of civilized humanity's greatest weaknesses is the inability to do this easily. If punching a time clock improves efficiency, it may conversely jangle a person's ability to endure to the end, that is, if he lets it. A survivor also possesses a utopian attitude. This does not reflect an orientation toward comfort, but an artistic ability to make even the most miserable existence seem like millennial splendor. I have witnessed this in my best students. Their digging sticks are works of art, their deadfall is ingenious, and their camps miracles of compactness and industry. There is nothing crude in the primitive existence of these people. Stone Age living implies two things. First, an immersion within the effective domain of life, and second, a life centered away from comfort and ease. Affecting living places much of the meaning of life in the world of work, of doing. Priorities in a hand-to-mouth existence quickly force industry to an exalted plane. If they did not, existence would become unbearable. Activity and industry merged with increased spiritual insight form a union that may preserve life beyond the normal limits. Life on a higher plane than comfort and ease may seem strange in our culture, but it is an important quality of people who survive. This point has grave consequences for the comfort-oriented individual lost in the wilderness. In Utah, a man once died of dehydration beside a desert stream because the water was uncomfortably dirty. Time is life, and where existence is reduced to a hand-and-mouth level, comfort must take a second seat. In survival terms, we might say that comfort only gets in the way. A strong person may die of exposure if he neglects himself, but he may also die if he babies himself. Lessons of survival learned in a classroom or laboratory setting may be helpful, but they will never replace direct application. My own experience has taught me that it is possible to rise above the comfort-seeking level in a primitive situation and establish priorities that not only ensure my survival, but grant me the added qualities of confidence and serenity as I attempt to exist in my environment. Even when the going gets rough and death becomes a grim possibility, that confidence and serenity never leaves. Thus, struggles become challenges and my mind is better able to function without fear or panic. I am reminded of the man who, alone in a vast desert with no hat, no water, and a broken leg, pulled himself up on one bruised and battered elbow and smiled at a bunch of dry grass, saying, "You know, if this keeps up, I might get discouraged." Through the years, I have presented the challenge of primitive survival to several thousand students. Under some of the toughest wilderness conditions, these students have tramped hundreds of miles across rivers, mountains, and deserts of the West. There is no question in my mind that young people today are as tough as their pioneer forebears. However, the most disturbing discovery of these expeditions has been the types of stress that cause people to give up. Many students drop in their tracks not from physical exhaustion, but from mental anguish. They are often afraid to make the effort once they realize the magnitude of the challenge. Then there is the other extreme. Those who at first appearance seem unable to make it, but who plow through to the end despite their physical limitations. They have their minds set on success. Incidents from 2 expeditions illustrate this positive stubbornness in a survival situation. John was overweight and a slow hiker. He found the pace exhausting and breathing difficult in the intense heat of the desert. Water was scarce, and the small group of students was bent on pushing to a small seep spring some 20 miles away. Worried, I assigned 2 students to hang back and keep an eye on him. 2 instructors in good shape pushed ahead, running with instructions to bring back water for the stragglers. At the seep spring, several hours later, I was surprised to hear that John had made it completely on his own. To top it off, he had assisted one of the students assigned to him, bringing in another student who had sprained an ankle. They came in singing. During the weeks that followed, John became the physician of his group and spent hours helping others. He made the 300-mile trek and never required more than his share of the meager food and water. On another expedition, we had been 3 weeks on the trail, our destination taking us into the wind, which is blowing in the first winter storm. The terrain was steep and broken. The advance scout returned with word of a large overhanging cliff that would shelter the whole group until the storm passed. It was located about 8 miles away near the top of a high ridge, and we began heading for it just as the sun went down. We had been several days on meager rations of water, and many of the students had bad blisters, which was par for any course of this kind. Our food supply consisted of a bag of flour and some brigand brush, ephedra, for making a warm drink. The first group to reach the cave built a fire and rolled up in blankets to sleep, too worn out to eat. A short time later, 3 more exhausted students came in with word that 6 others were having a rough time about 3 miles from the cave, halfway up the steep hill. The rest of the students were struggling up in small groups. By this time it was dark, the wind had increased to a gale, and snow was falling. I found the group who had arrived first at the cave arguing with the 3 who had brought in the report. The newcomers wanted the others to help make brigand tea and ash cakes, flour and water, patted into small cakes and baked in hot ashes, to take back to the struggling students below. The arguing proved futile, so the 3 alone prepared about 50 ash cakes and warm brigand tea. Then one stayed at the fire cooking more food, while the other 2 went back down the mountain with food and drink to aid the 6 laggers. By 2 o'clock a.m., they had brought in the last of the group, fed them again, and stacked a huge pile of firewood. They warmed cold feet, doctored blisters, and cheered hearts as best they could under the circumstances. Zeke Sanchez, one of those 3 students, became a leader of many desert treks.